In the volatile landscape of the Middle East, few rivalries hold as much weight and danger as the conflict brewing between Israel and Iran. It's a story of two nations, both relentless and both willing to go to any lengths to safeguard their vision for the region's future. For years, this tension has simmered, sometimes flaring up, sometimes hidden behind diplomatic facades. Yet, now more than ever, signs are surfacing that this clash is on the verge of a new chapter, a chapter that could shake the region and possibly even the world. Imagine for a moment the stakes involved. Israel, a nation with one of the most advanced military forces in the world, has continually voiced concerns over Iran's nuclear ambitions, claiming that a nuclear armed Iran would be an unacceptable risk to Israeli survival. Iran, on the other hand, sees its nuclear pursuits as a path to secure its sovereignty and as a necessary step to establish its influence in the region. Both sides are locked in a deadly game of chess, where each move is calculated and carefully analyzed. But what happens if one side makes a mistake, or if both decide it's time to stop playing games? For Israel, Iran's nuclear program is seen as nothing less than a direct existential threat. Israeli leaders, from former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the current administration, have repeatedly emphasized that they cannot afford to allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons. Their reasoning is straightforward. A nuclear Iran would fundamentally shift the balance of power in the Middle East. For years, Israel has conducted a shadow campaign to slow down Iran's nuclear capabilities, from targeted assassinations of key Iranian scientists to cyber attacks aimed at disrupting nuclear facilities. These covert actions have delayed but not halted Iran's progress, and each day brings the possibility that Iran is getting closer to a breakthrough. Iran, however, sees things differently. From their perspective, their nuclear ambitions are not about aggression, but about survival. They view Israel as a puppet of the West, specifically the United States, which has a long history of interference in Iranian affairs. To the Iranian government, a nuclear arsenal is the ultimate insurance policy, a deterrent to any nation that might consider meddling in their internal matters. With nuclear weapons, Iran would not only solidify its position in the Middle East, but would also deter Israel and the United States from any thoughts of regime change or military intervention. The Iranian leadership has long viewed Israel as a regional competitor, but this rivalry has intensified as Iran has expanded its influence across the Middle East. In Lebanon, Iran has funded and armed Hezbollah, a group committed to resisting Israeli interests. In Syria, Iranian forces have operated close to the Israeli border, much to Israel's alarm. In Iraq, Iran's influence has grown considerably, with militia groups sympathetic to Iran's cause now holding significant power. For Israel, Iran's growing footprint in the region is seen as a strategic encirclement, a tightening noose around the Jewish state. Israel's worst fear is a scenario where it faces simultaneous threats on multiple fronts, with Iran pulling the strings from behind the scenes. As tensions have escalated, both nations have resorted to acts of covert warfare to gain the upper hand. Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, has been linked to various high-profile assassinations within Iran, targeting scientists and military officials associated with the nuclear program. These assassinations are meant to send a message. Israel will not allow Iran to reach nuclear capability, no matter the cost. Iran, in response, has sought ways to retaliate, although their options are often limited by Israel's superior technology and intelligence gathering capabilities. Nonetheless, Iran has been accused of carrying out cyber attacks on Israeli infrastructure and has continued to supply its regional allies with weapons and training, ensuring that they can serve as proxies in the event of a direct confrontation. The involvement of global superpowers further complicates this rivalry. The United States, Israel's closest ally, has imposed severe sanctions on Iran in an effort to cripple its economy and restrict its nuclear ambitions. Under President Donald Trump, the United States even withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, a move that was celebrated by Israel but condemned by European allies. On the other hand, Russia has increasingly found itself aligned with Iran's interests, especially in Syria, where both nations have supported the Assad regime. This delicate balance of power among the global superpowers adds another layer of complexity, with each player aware that any misstep could have worldwide ramifications. The world has already seen glimpses of what an Israel-Iran conflict could look like. There have been numerous skirmishes in Syria, where Israeli jets have targeted Iranian facilities and convoys believed to be transporting weapons to Hezbollah. Each time an Israeli missile strikes Iranian assets in Syria, the world holds its breath, wondering if this will be the spark that ignites a larger war. Thus far, both nations have shown restraint, avoiding actions that would escalate into an all-out war. But as Israel grows increasingly concerned about the progress of Iran's nuclear program, some analysts fear that a preemptive strike may be on the horizon. This hypothetical strike would likely be swift and devastating, aimed at crippling Iran's nuclear capabilities before they reach fruition. Israeli jets, some of the most advanced in the world, could target key nuclear facilities across Iran. However, such an attack would be far from straightforward. Iran's nuclear sites are spread across the country, many of them fortified deep underground, designed specifically to withstand aerial bombardment. Israel would need to execute a highly coordinated attack, using a combination of air power, cyber warfare, and possibly even ground forces to ensure success. And even if Israel's military managed to strike these sites, there is no guarantee that it would be enough to fully dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities. Iran has made it clear that any direct attack on its soil would be met with retaliation. And unlike previous conflicts, where proxy forces such as Hezbollah or Hamas have done much of the fighting, Iran might choose to respond directly. They could target Israeli cities with missiles, launch cyber attacks on Israeli infrastructure, or use their allies in the region to open multiple fronts against Israel. The consequences would be catastrophic, not just for Israel and Iran, but for the Middle East as a whole. Oil prices would skyrocket, economies would falter, and the global market would feel the effects almost immediately. The fragile political landscape of the Middle East would be shaken to its core, potentially drawing in other nations and triggering a much larger conflict. For ordinary citizens in Israel and Iran, the prospect of a full-scale war is terrifying. Both countries have prepared their populations for the possibility of conflict, with Israelis regularly participating in missile defense drills and Iranians living under the constant threat of sanctions and isolation. But the reality of war, especially one involving potential nuclear facilities, is something that few can truly comprehend. The fear of an unknown future looms large over the Middle East, with families on both sides hoping for peace but preparing for the worst. The question remains, how far will Israel go to stop Iran, and at what cost? The stakes are higher than ever, with each side seemingly unwilling to back down. For Israel, allowing Iran to reach nuclear capability is seen as an unacceptable risk, one that must be prevented at all costs. For Iran, its nuclear ambitions are a matter of national pride and security, a statement to the world that they will not be bullied or coerced into submission. Both sides have drawn their lines in the sand, and the world watches, waiting to see who will make the next move. As this situation unfolds, the role of diplomacy cannot be ignored. There are voices on both sides, as well as in the international community, who believe that negotiation and compromise are the only paths to a peaceful resolution. The Iran nuclear deal, although fraught with controversy, represented one such attempt at diplomacy. It was a rare moment where the world came together to try and de-escalate the tensions, providing Iran with economic relief in exchange for limits on its nuclear program. However, with the deal's collapse, these diplomatic efforts have stalled, leaving the region on edge once again. In the end, the rivalry between Israel and Iran is not just about nuclear weapons or regional dominance. It's about two different visions for the future of the Middle East. Israel envisions a region where its security is guaranteed, where it can exist without the constant threat of annihilation. Iran, on the other hand, sees itself as a regional power, determined to assert its influence and resist what it views as Western imperialism. These clashing visions have brought the two nations to the brink of war, with no easy way out. For now, the world watches as Israel and Iran continue their dance of shadow warfare, each side probing, testing, and waiting for the other to make a move. The stakes are high, and the consequences could be disastrous.